All right, welcome everyone. We might as well get started. Happy Friday to everyone. I'm happy to see you here and thrilled to have Nicole Tucker-Smith with us today. My name is Lucy Gray, and I'm going to take you through some information about our work, and then we'll get started learning about Nicole and what she's been up to in her professional role as well. And with me today also is Julian Reed, who is going to be doing the Proust questionnaire, the Proust questionnaire for us today that normally Don does. So we're happy to have Julian here as well. She's been part of Actionable Innovations Global, and we're excited to have her here as well today. So hopefully I can navigate these slides. If you're wondering what we do, our intention is to be a professional learning community that's inclusive and open to educators and innovators all over the world. You can find our website at Actionable Innovations Global. It's a community that you can join, and you can post in there and look at some of our resources and that sort of thing. It started out originally as the Global Education Conference Network that I used to run with Steve Hargadon. We have parted ways in doing our own projects, and the Global Education Conference Network has now been rebranded as Actionable Innovations Global. And I have a couple of new partners on this project, and we're bringing back our Global Ed Conference that we did every November. We're going to be doing again this November in partnership with World Savvy. So some announcements about that are coming in the next couple of weeks, and we're really excited about it. Our intention really is to support and inspire education leaders. We think it's important right now, given the stage that we are in the pandemic and how educators are feeling. We host conversations and connect people. And we also write about global education innovations in a Medium blog as well. So that's a little bit about what we do, and things are kind of evolving and changing in that department. If you want to get more involved with us, you're always welcome to. If you want to be a speaker, or if you want to be part of kind of our group that is leading this, we'd love to have you, anyone. And you can email me at Lucy Gray Consulting, and that will help you. And then we can get started and have a conversation about that. We are on social media, so if you scan the QR code there, you can join. You can find us on YouTube and all sorts of other channels. So that will give it to you right there, or you can use the Linktree link that's there at the top of the screen as well. And I'll put that in the chat as we get going today. But all of the recordings of these conversations that we've had the past couple months are up on YouTube. Today's will probably be up tonight. I usually do a post show notes that takes me a while to do, so that may not be for a little while, but the recording will be up tonight. So you can definitely look at it and review it and pass it along to others. What has been really interesting to me, writing the show notes for this, has been re-listening to the webinars that we've had has been incredibly valuable. And I've learned to speed things up a little bit on YouTube and listen to things at twice the speed when I'm reviewing it. But I'm always learning so much more the second time around. So I really encourage you, there's probably going to be a lot of information coming at you today, to listen to it again and see what you can take away from it. We've had some really amazing speakers and who have been so professionally generous with their time, and we're deeply grateful for their expertise, and including with Nicole today. So today, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us who you are, where you're from, what you do, what your interest is in innovation and education, anything like that. If you want to put your Twitter handle in there or your LinkedIn profile in there, that's great. We want this to be a networking event so that you can grow your own professional learning network. And we use the hashtag GlobalEd22. So if you feel like tweeting something out or inviting friends in or whatever, please do that. The only thing that we ask is that if you're not speaking, keep yourself muted, and you can ask questions in the chat. We can also leave some Q&A at the end for you to jump in and share your observations and comments and questions at that point. So that's kind of the logistics for today. So welcome, Nicole, and I want to make sure that you're spotlighted here, and so that so everybody can see you. And there you are. And I hope, hopefully this will, I'm not showing and you are, but I'm still getting my Zoom controls mastered here. Nicole, I first met you very briefly at a Brain Pop event at ISTE, probably the last ISTE before the pandemic. And my friend Andrew Gardner introduced us, and I've been following you on LinkedIn, and you always have so much great material out there. And I thought, I think we need to invite her into Actionable Innovations and have her tell us her story and share her work with us. And I really believe in professional generosity, that people working in a space to improve education for students and teachers, I think it's important to share the people the ideas and the people that we come across. And my favorite thing to do is to kind of see this synergy and serendipity happen when I introduce people together to each other and share their talents. And then my other motivation too is that I think I personally am motivated, or I'm very interested in becoming a better professional developer and being more intentional with it. And I think I do fine when I deliver professional development, but I really want to be good at it. And you're really good at it. I could tell from the webinar that I attended through Jumpstart PD last week that you are phenomenal. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you and Jolene for a second, so that you can, Jolene can ask you some of our Proust questionnaire questions to kind of get us warmed up.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, and Nicole has the greatest smile. And I wonder if she's wonderful at what she does with that smile like that. So I don't know if it's a Proust questionnaire or Proust questionnaire. It's a Don Buckley question. I don't know how we pronounce it, but Don loves to do this. And in his absence, I'm going to try and do it with you today. And so these are questionnaires, and he loves to read Vanity Fair. In the back, there's always a list of these kinds of questions, but they go back to a French writer who is named Marcel Proust or Proust, whichever we decided. And they come from a parlor game in Victorian times. And the one we're just gonna do 2 or 3, but the one that I picked right away reminds me of a song I've listened to lately, because I've been doing a lot. It's that time of year we're outside doing a lot of yard work and working our gardens and planting flowers. And so I'll just turn on my Amazon Music and let it play on my speaker while I'm outside working. And Luke Combs has one. This is country. I like all genres. And Nicole, I don't know if you know Luke Combs, but he has one called Doing This, and you'll have to listen to Doing This. And he talks about, if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing? So we're going to put a little different phrase to it, make it a little more professional. So what occupation would you choose if you weren't in education?
Ooh. Okay, so that's a great question. So I actually, before I moved into education, I actually wanted to be in communications. So my plan was to be a television journalist. I was set on being the next Oprah. That's what I was going to do. And my first year at the University of Virginia, I go to declare like my major, and the year that I entered UVA, this is in 1995, was the year that same semester they shut down their communications department. And so I couldn't do communications. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And one day I was walking across this bridge. And if you've ever been in Charlottesville, University of Virginia campus, there's this bridge where if you jump on it, it'll actually oscillate. Not just one person, you have to get like a group of people, but it'll oscillate. And so I'm walking across this bridge. So it has a kind of a magical feeling already, right? I'm walking across this bridge and I see it's like a little 8.5 by 11 flyer saying, come to the Office of African American Affairs to learn more about the education program. And so I went to this meeting, and there were only like 9 of us there, but about half of us applied for the Curry School of Education. And that's why I'm in education, literally because they had an interest meeting at the Office of African American Affairs, and I went because I was dead set on being a TV journalist.
Well, lucky us and good for you. Although I don't think you're making as much money as Oprah would make. So, but maybe in the future. So, that was an interesting one. That's good. So you'll have to listen to Luke Combs in doing this. The next question I had for you, because I was trying to think of which ones I wanted, let me find it here. I just lost it. Here we go. Is who is your favorite hero? And this could be a hero in real life, or I don't know if you know this. Yesterday was National Superhero Day. So if you want to pick a superhero, you can pick a superhero too. And I only know this because my 95-year-old mother had a big to-do last night at her assisted living. So you can either be a superhero or a hero in real life. Who would you be?
Okay, sorry, I got distracted by the chat. Say the question.
Nicole, pay attention.
I was replying to my fellow Wahoo and I got distracted.
Well, that's all right. I was watching Scott Moss is working on his doctorate, and I was like, oh, good for you, Scott.
Okay, I'm gonna focus. I know it's about superheroes. Say it one more time.
So if you could be a hero, any hero in the world, who would you be? It could be a superhero or a real person. So if you could be a hero, who would you be? What's and why?
Okay. So if I could be a superhero, because that's different than superpower. Like if I had a superpower, I'd want to like teleport.
Well, that was another question, but you go ahead. Why don't answer that one first?
I'd want to be able to go to different places very quickly. And my kids and I have talked about it. Like my superhero name would be Blink, and I would just be able to go places. But like my superhero in general, my persona, honestly, one of the things that I want to do, and this will probably be at some point in my life, I'm going to do this, but I feel really called, if I had a superhero power, would be to mentor every young person who ages out of foster care and has to leave their home.
Oh, you gave me chills with that one. That is super awesome. My neighbor's daughter has 8 fosters right now. And that's a lot, and most of them are special needs. So that's a real calling. So good for you. I know a lot get lost in that system. So good for you. So last one, who is the hero in real life that you would look up to? Who has helped guide you, or who would you say is your hero?
So I have really been learning more and more about Harriet Tubman, actually, which I know like we all learn about like when we're so young, but just the resilience that she had and her willingness to be like, no, I'm gonna go. And she has this one line, and I don't know if she really said this, but I'm gonna say that she did. It was inspired by her, but there's this line in the movie Harriet, where she says, I'm not going to stop saving people just because it's far, right? When they say you can't just get to the north, now you got to get to Canada, right? She's not, I'm not going to stop just because it's far.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's this idea like, I'm not going to not do this just because it's hard. Yeah. That doesn't even make sense. And, and that kind of resilience to me is just something I really admire. And I'm like, well, if she can do it, then so can I. And just her whole like, she even like, if somebody came with them and they were going to mess up everything for everybody, she's like, no, you better get it together.
Get off the train.
Yeah, you better get it together. So
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for indulging us with these, Nicole. It's just a fun way to get started. And Lucy, I'll turn it back over to you. Lucy, I think you're muted.
I do this every time. Every time.
We all do it every day. It's okay.
Every time.
It's like we just need to have a recording we play for that.
Yeah. I'm trying to decide what view I want everybody to be in. I guess I'm going to spotlight for everyone. There we go. All right, there you go. So Nicole is going to start out and tell us a little bit about her work and where she's been. And then we'll have some time to talk and chit chat and ask her questions and that sort of thing and pick her brain, which I hate that expression, but I'm using it. We're so lucky to have you here. So take it away, Nicole. We'd love to hear what you have to say about curriculum equity, the political scenario right now that we're all aghast by, whatever, however you want to address it. We're excited to have you here. So thank you for coming.
Great, great. Thank you so much for having me. And I love this term, professional generosity. I was like, yes, that is what I believe in that. And the idea of, I was like, when we operate in scarcity, we get scarcity. When we operate in abundance, we create abundance. And so I just really appreciate this opportunity to be here today. I definitely want to hear questions, but I thought it'd be good if I started with just a little bit of what's my personal mission and how did I get here? So my personal mission in life is for professional learning for educators to be better, like just to not be the worst. I think in order for us to really make advances just in society, education is a critical component. And to make advances in education, professional learning is a critical component. And so often professional learning is not done in a way that it can be the most effective, or better said, to have the highest impact. So that's my personal mission. Now, how did I get here? Started as a teacher, middle school teacher, primarily English language arts and social studies. I was a school-based administrator. I was also a system-wide coordinator of professional development and training here in Baltimore County, Maryland, where I currently reside. I grew up in the DC area, Northern Virginia area, but I moved to Baltimore when I got married. And in all of those experiences, I felt like we make some decisions at the district level or even the state level, and it doesn't make its way down to the classroom impact that we're really hoping that it'll have. And there's this disconnect here. And so my goal was really to think about how can professional learning truly impact in a positive way classroom practice. And so that's when I founded LessonCast. So founded LessonCast back in 2012. I was trying to do two things at once. And then I moved into doing LessonCast full time. And Lucy already put the link in there. So thank you, Lucy, for putting the link in the chat. And so LessonCast.com is all about bringing professional learning into classroom practice. Okay, so that's what it's about. Now, at first we were like, well, we're just going to do professional development on any topic. But what we started to find more and more our calling was towards professional development around inclusion and universal design for learning, and professional development around equity, best practices in equity, specifically work around looking at equity in curriculum or equity in the environment, equity as it relates to special education referrals and disproportionality, et cetera. So some of those topics that people find difficult, but are truly important and need to powerful outcomes. And so that's where we felt called to kind of do our professional development. And also I wanted to, at the same time, as we were delivering professional development with LessonCast, and we're doing professional development, we're capturing examples of how this is working, and I'm doing this work, and people are like, man, that was the best professional development I've ever been to. Like, seriously, can you put that in a book? And after enough people said that, we wrote the book, Supercharger Professional Learning. So my co-author and I could put the link to that in the chat. Here we go. Let's see here. Yes, here's the book, Supercharger Professional Learning. And it's a workbook. You don't have to read it front to back. It's 40 concrete strategies to improving your professional learning practice, your professional learning community spaces. I also teach it as a course through CAST Publishing. And I also just really feel strongly that we can all do better in terms of making our adult learning experiences interactive and engaging. I call it refueling rather than fatiguing. And so that was that. So this book was set to come out February 2020. I had all these plans of where I was going to go, book tour, promotions, all those things. And I know that sounds funny now, but in January 2020, that seemed like an actual plan that I could have in February 2020. But January 7th, 2020, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was like, ooh, I might not be able to do all the things that I had planned to do. And so I knew that I still wanted to stay connected to schools, to communities, to all the organizations that I work with. I was scheduled to speak at all these conferences, and I really didn't know whether or not I was going to be able to do that. So I started crafting at that time what became jumpstartpd.com. And I believe that link that Lucy already put that link in the chat too, jumpstartpd.com. And yeah, it's something. It's something, right? It really changes your perspective. And when I was thinking about how can I stay connected, I wanted to create a free online network for folks who design and provide professional development. So whether you're the person who signs off on it, you're the person who's actually physically delivering it, or you're the person who's designing it and planning it, Jumpstart PD.com is a free network for folks who are interested in equity-related, equity-minded, I should say, professional learning, whether that's related to inclusion or best practices as it's related to diversity and inclusion and equity. So that happened. And I will say that going through the process of cancer during COVID, well, one, I didn't know the whole world was going to shut down. So that too, changed things. So I already had this network kind of built in, and I had already started refining my virtual PD practices by the time everybody had to start moving towards that. So I also wrote the book Remote PDs in as well. It's an ebook. It's very cheap on Amazon. Anyway, the other thing that I started to do in that year of 2020 is I got a lot of clarity on what am I uniquely designed to do in life. And I'm going to be the best at that because only I am here to do that. And I feel like I'm uniquely designed to really help improve professional learning related to universal design for learning and inclusion and equity related practice. And when I say equity related practice, I saw that my link to my article that was in ASCD, The Illusion of Equity PD. That is something that I learned. The illusion of equity PD is something that I learned. There's a lot of equity PD out there that looks like it works and everybody leaves feeling great, but it doesn't work and it doesn't change practice. And it's actually dangerous because it's a little bit of knowledge and not a lot of difference. And then there's other professional development, and this can happen with anything, but particularly equity related professional development. There's other equity related professional development that it doesn't feel like it works and nobody wants to do it because now everybody just feels bad about having bias and they don't know what to do about it. And then there's also a third type of equity professional development that works as we're building competence and confidence together. And so I encourage you to read that book, that article, The Illusion of Equity PD, if you want to know more about that. But the other thing that I got really super clear on in the time where I had to be still, right? 2020, where I had to be still going through, because I had to do chemo and radiation and surgery and all of that. So it was about an 8-month process. The other thing that I got really clear on was the impact of curriculum as it relates to equity. And so one of the things that my team and I designed was the Curriculum Representation Workshop Series. So you have to remember that I am very steeped in universal design for learning. So UDL, in fact, I'm the co-chair of UDL Rising to Equity right now. So I've been working with CAST for like 10 years. I'm a contractor through them. They asked me to partner with them on this really important initiative, UDL Rising to Equity. If you want to learn more about it, I'll put the link in the chat and you can sign up if you want to hear more. But one of the things, because I have that UDL kind of lens when I look at things, I was thinking about, well, where does representation fit in relation to equity? Like I'm looking at these UDL guidelines for multiple means of representation, but nowhere in here do I see where representation matters in terms of identity. And so I developed the Curriculum Representation Workshop Series. And here's a little, if you want to watch it, don't watch it now because it's a video. If you want to watch a little video, you can see here, and I could put the brochure in the chat if people are interested, but that's a little 2-minute video on how it works. But really I realized it's so important if we want to do this work moving forward, if we really want to create a better space for everyone, we have to look at our goals as they relate to curriculum and who is left out, who is absent, and the fact that everybody needs to see mirrors and windows. And when students only see themselves represented, they don't realize how many diverse perspectives are out there. And when students never see themselves represented, they feel like they don't belong. And so for every school that says they want students to feel like they belong, then you need to look at your curriculum. Who shows up in your curriculum? That's going to impact who feels like they belong. And so the last thing I'm going to share in the chat is one of my op-eds that I've written recently called Why the Debate Over School Curriculum Matters to Everyone. And this is the last story I'm going to share, and then I really want to hear some questions that you all may have. So this is an op-ed that I wrote because I really felt like we needed to change the narrative. As I was working with schools, they're like, man, the pushback that we're getting is just so exhausting and tiring. And when I worked with schools, I always helped them develop a pushback emergency kit. I was like, all right, look, whenever you're going to change things from the status quo, you have to anticipate pushback. And that's because of this thing called inequity, equilibrium, and I can talk about that later. But you have to anticipate pushback in the same way that you don't wait until somebody's bleeding before you put Band-Aids in your first aid emergency kit. You don't wait until you get pushback to pack your pushback emergency kit. So these are things you should already have in store, and everybody should be on the same page. So we work through that. But I also just heard from so many educators who want to do the right thing by their students, but some of the protests that they were getting at school board meetings, they weren't sure how to handle that. So I'm working with them individually, but I also said, you know what, we need to change this national narrative, because making school curricula more equitable is not about making children feel bad. It really isn't. It's about something so much greater. So I wrote that article that I just put in the chat. I think I put it in the chat. Yeah, Why the Debate Over School Curriculum Matters to Everyone. But here's the rundown. Here, I'm going to give you the short version of it. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that, I had breast cancer, and I purchased in my treatment process, one of the nurses recommended that I try a scalp cooling cap. So they have these new scalp cooling caps for people who are going through chemotherapy, and it's an attempt to preserve your hair. And I wanted to use the cap because one of the toxins that I was going to be receiving was known to sometimes cause alopecia in a way where I would lose my hair permanently, not just temporarily. And I was like, look, I really would like to preserve my hair and at least some privacy. And so I purchased it. At the time, it wasn't covered by insurance. I'm not sure if it is yet or not. It might be, but at the time it was not covered by insurance. It was fairly new in that year. And when I got the directions for this scalp cooling cap, it said, and actually when I'm talking with the nurses, because back then in COVID, I couldn't have anybody come with me. So I had to go to chemo by myself, and I'm trying to use this scalp cooling cap, and you actually need help to put it on. You can't do it by yourself. And so I'm working with the nurses, and they're like, look, we've been to the training on how to use this. In order to use it, you have to thoroughly wet your hair so it will lie flat. And I said, that's not how my hair works. If I wet my hair, it is going to poof up. That's what happens with my hair. And they were like, well, I don't know what to do. So they called the manufacturers, and the manufacturers couldn't give them any better advice. So I tried to do what they said, but wet my hair, what happens? It dries very quickly, and then it insulates. It was almost like I had a hat on my head. So it reduced the effectiveness, and I lost all my hair except for a few little strands up front that I was determined to hold on to because it gave me some sense of normalcy. I could do my bangs every day. And because that's the one part that wasn't covered up by the rest of my hair. So that's what stayed. And so the manufacturers actually called me because I don't go, I'm not going down quietly. So the manufacturers called me and they said, we recognize that we don't have good instructions for your type of hair. And I said, but you sold me this product and it's expensive. And they were like, yeah, well, if it makes you feel better, we're doing some research right now in the UK on what we should do about it. And I'm like, well, how did this even get approved? Because I know I'm IRB certified. I know that anytime you do clinical trials, it has to be a diverse representation sampling. So I go and I pulled up all the trials that were submitted to the FDA. All of them were Caucasian women. I was like, this shouldn't even have been approved. How does this happen? And I thought about it. I was like, no one was trying to be discriminatory against me. But when we raise our young people, and when we have some folks who only see themselves represented, they never think that there's an alternative that needs to be considered, that there are other people that need to be considered. And so we're training people to only see one way, to only see themselves as universal. And that is really dangerous. Case in fact, and then I'm going to open up for questions. It's come out, the studies, one of the reasons why Black and brown people were dying so much more from COVID was because those oxygen indicators aren't accurate on dark skin. Right? This is why we need to diversify our curriculum. It's about life or death. It's about caring for all of humanity. It's about making the world a better place for everyone. It's not about making people feel bad. We're dying. And so I thought that was really important. Now, I'll have to tell you, some people did not like my story. I got called a lot of things, Black, racist, Togo, back to Africa, all those other things. But I feel like it's really important. So I'm going to keep marching to my own drumbeat. So anyway, any questions?
I have a comment, and I'll unspotlight you so we can all everybody can see each other. You are an incredibly brave person for a number of reasons. One, going through chemo and all that during COVID. My experience was a little different because it was towards the tail end of things. So at least, my husband could go to a couple of things with me. And then two, being brave for raising these important points when there's so much hostility going on right now. And we have to do that. I think that's part of the, when we see these things, we need to
speak up.
Yeah. So I think that's the first lesson that's learned. The other piece of this is, I think there are people who are afraid of, I don't think people have the language to adequately address equity the way it should be. I think that's probably where you come into play with a lot of the coaching that you do, in terms of explaining things in a way that makes sense, and like you just did for us here. So tell us a little bit more about where do you think we should go as educators in terms of helping our schools move along, acquiring the language and the knowledge to be more equitable? Where would you recommend people start?
Yes. Okay. So great question. So first thing is recognizing that no one can learn when they feel threatened. That's the first thing. No one's going to learn when they feel threatened. And so I learned that, so for example, I'll do these sessions and I call them UDL plus equity sessions. So I find that a lot of folks who've been studying universal design for learning are really open to learning about equity. It's not necessarily a prerequisite, but I call it the gateway drug to equity work. So, because it helps thinking about this idea of variability, et cetera. And so, when I do the work, folks will be like, oh, I see what you did there. You went like this, gotcha. And because it's kind of like you have to get folks to, and it's not like I'm not tricking them, but we have to get into a space where we feel like we're comfortable. We're not trying to do a gotcha. We're building community. We're building a sense of mutual interdependence. And so the first place I would say is to think about just, who are we feeling called to be, and recognizing that our communities are only as equitable as the most marginalized people feel. And so if we look in our spaces and say, who might be feeling marginalized or might actually be being marginalized in this moment, where are our outcomes most disproportionate? Let's just examine what we're doing in our processes that are leading to those outcomes, because every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it does. That's from W. Edward Demings. I didn't make that up. right? So every system's perfectly designed to get the results that it's currently getting. So what are we doing that's leading to that impact? And so when I work with schools, and if you're working in your contexts, take a moment to think about what this is. What I'll put it this way. We can do the whole learning what implicit bias is. That's nice. You've learned the term. But what does it mean in this context? Equity is the work, but it needs a driver. So are you focusing on what equity looks like in your curriculum? Are you focusing on what equity looks like in your disciplinary practices? Are you focusing on what equity looks like in your front office? If I come into your front office, am I going to feel like I belong there? Be super specific. You can learn all the things. You can read all the books. That's good. That's baseline. But then look at your specific processes and say, where does equity play a role here? Where is bias creating unnecessary barriers? Where are we not fully embracing the diversity of our community? And then we can make changes, because the same way we created inequitable systems, we can undo them. We can absolutely undo them. I will say Cast by Isabella Wilkerson, Cast with an C-A-S-T-E, like really helped me understand this idea of we created this, we can undo it. And this idea of not thinking so much about racism, but thinking about marginalization. Where are people being marginalized and how do we change those systems really opened up a world of possibilities for me.
And Lucy, I'd like to just say to Nicole, I mean, I think this is so important, Nicole, not just looking at African Americans versus the normal makeup in a classroom, but our classrooms are changing. They're multicultural. We have all kinds of cultures. We have, and I don't know if I'll say his name correctly, Ronald Dungo from Uganda with us today. So jump up, Ronald. And I've worked in Africa, I've worked in Jordan, and equity means a lot of different places, a lot of different things in a lot of different places. So I love your lens because it's something that can be used in all those situations.
Yes, and let me tell you, Julie, so this is a definition that we came up with, and because people were always like, well, what's your definition of equity, right? And so when we were focused on equity in curriculum, we developed this definition, which really I think applies broader than that. And I'll say it first, but I can type it in the chat. But equity is the agency to pursue options that align with your aspirations. Are we providing the agency to pursue? And so all of those words are really important, right? So agency is, I can set a goal and I have the self-efficacy to know that I can get there. Pursuit, learning goals should be a pursuit. That comes from Goldie Muhammad's book, Cultivating Genius, where she talks about learning goals as pursuits. What are we going after? It's the agency to pursue those options. But everybody, so if you think about women's history, over time, women have had options, but do those options align with your aspirations? Right? So they may not have been the best of options for you. And so equity is having the agency to pursue options that align with your aspirations. That's the definition that we went with to help think about what does it mean in curriculum. And then also it applies in other settings as well.
Yeah, and I think what you said too, and I'll be quiet, is safety is so important. Do they feel safe to speak up? Are they seen? Are they understood? And so the mirrors and the windows, that was a great analogy as well.
Great, yeah, and so that comes, well, mirrors and windows, it's so old, and we've been talking about this since like 1989. So there's a great essay from 1989 by Emily Stiles called Curriculum as Window and Mirror. And that's good, but then it's expanded upon by Kim Parker. She does a lot with disrupt texts, and she talks about windows, mirrors, and sliding doors where you can slide into the story of another, because that's how we build empathy. Because the thing is, we're all empathetic. The default is to be empathetic with people you identify with and less empathetic with people you don't identify with. So when people say, oh, we just need to have empathy, actually what it is we need to choose to empathize with folks whom we perceive to be different from ourselves. That's different than just being empathetic. And the one other thing I want to say about having a safe space. So I've started to shift my language to talking about a brave space. How do we create a brave space? Because sometimes when we say safe space, people get confused and think, well, I should never feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, well, if you never feel uncomfortable, you are probably not going to learn too much. because growth is often uncomfortable. So is this a brave space? And by brave space, I mean safe enough to take risks, right? So are we creating a brave space? And I'll work with teachers and they say, you know what, I want to do the right thing, but I'm afraid I'm going to make a mistake. And that's real because we want to do well by our students. And so I say, well, guess what? You are going to make a mistake. We're all going to make mistakes because we're human. So you can go ahead and rest assured that's going to happen. So now the question is, what happens when we make a mistake? As a community, what can we be committed to? What happens when we make a mistake in this brave space? Recognizing that our space will not be perfect, but we're going to work on it together. And that in this brave space, everyone is allowed to show up as their authentic selves. And so we talk about calling in versus calling out. Loretta J. Ross has a great TED talk on that. Why it's better to call in versus calling out. And so we do a lot of that work in our professional development too. And that's the kind of the groundwork that has to happen first. You have to create that brave space first. You have to say, this is what we're committed to first before you jump in and start trying to change things, before you tell teachers, okay, you need to do these lessons. And a lot of these lessons that you've seen kind of go awry is because that brave space work and that understanding and that sense of cultural humility have not been established first.
I love that. Thank you.
Oh, and don't credit me. I didn't come up with the term brave space.
No, but I love your thoughts.
Okay, yeah.
You did come up with your thoughts.
I think that we've gotten into a little bit of, everybody is really quick to call people out these days. And I don't know how productive that is. And there are people who are well-intentioned, but don't necessarily maybe they're just beginning their journey to understand equity, and so they don't necessarily know when they're making a mistake. Mm-hmm. And so having some grace for people who may stumble, like you're saying, I think is important. We have to do a lot of healing right now. Mm-hmm. On a number of fronts, due to COVID, due to Black Lives Matter, to all the equity issues that have come up in the last couple of years. There's a lot of work to be done. And I don't know where we start in general. I think, but it feels to me like maybe starting with that culture mm-hmm. is like the building block that everybody needs to do right now in order to do all the work that has to come out of COVID, out of this very weird era that we're in. I just wanted to mention, last night I went to a webinar. There's a really awesome group out of Chicago called the Family Action Network, which did face-to-face lectures with big people, in the North Shore area here for parents, Evanston High School, New Trier High School, those kinds of areas. And now they're online, which is great because it's more accessible to everybody. And they had a surgeon from University of Chicago who actually, her daughter was in my class at the lab school there a long time ago, who's written a book called Parent Nation. And it just came out, and her name's Dana Suskind. And they interviewed 15,000 parents, apparently. And there's kind of an advocacy kit that comes with this. But my point, thinking back to when I taught in Chicago public schools, a lot of the families that I worked with and some of the people in the schools themselves did not necessarily know what resources were available to help kids or to know the language or how we should be, approaching things. An example would be, a guidance counselor saying, go to your pediatrician and get Ritalin for your kid. Mm-hmm. Without really understanding what the issues were at play. It's a much more complicated scenario sometimes with kids, right? So I think it's incumbent that we all work together as, and I think what Dana's message was that there's an advocacy piece that as communities, we owe it to our kids and to everybody else. It's not just about our own families mm-hmm. to work for them. So anyway, I just want to recommend that as something that might be slightly related to this. I thought it was interesting and had some kind of tangential themes that you're talking about here. Anyway, does anybody else have a question? Does anybody want to grab the mic and ask Nicole a question or have a comment about some of the things that she's been sharing with us? I'd love you to grab the mic and just chat away.
And while somebody's getting prepared for that, I'm going to put in the chat something called 5-15-45 resources. Now, these are all focused on curriculum representation. These are some of the resources that I use in that curriculum representation series that I mentioned. But if you're looking for places to learn more, there are some resources there, and they're organized by what can you do if you have 5 minutes? What can you do if you have 15 minutes? What can you do if you have 45 minutes? Right? Because we all have 24 hours. It's about what we choose to do with our time.
So the other thought that's been occurring to me earlier in your comments, about teacher professional development in general. And one place I worked, I was designing a technology professional development program for the teachers in this set of schools. And the head guy, who never actually had taught any point in his life, I think he'd been in the Peace Corps and had a PhD. I said, teachers are really tired of having professional development on, let's say, guided reading all the time, focused on just that, and they have no other choice, and they want some autonomy in the matter. And he goes, well, what if they don't know? I can still see him saying this to me 10 years later. What if they don't know that they're not good at guided reading and that they need more professional development? This idea that if we keep on pouring more professional development on them, it's going to make them better. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. And that they're not smart enough to know what they need themselves professionally. And my view has always been about empowering teachers to be curious and want to learn more and want to buy in, and that growth will happen naturally if you have motivated teachers, right? And there's some people who don't believe that. They feel like if we just train them, it's going to be better. And I'm curious about can you elaborate more on your beliefs about professional development and what works with teachers and what sticks with them?
Yes. Okay, so a couple of things that one, I think that as much as agency is important for students, it's also important for teachers. Also, I don't really use the term, I don't really believe in buy-in. I feel like buy-in is trying to sell somebody something. When I work with leaders and professional development teams, I say, what we need to think about is believe in. Are we creating a believe in reason? Are we communicating a believe in reason? Meaning, whoever your participants are, let's say they're educators, do they believe that if they invest the time to learn this thing that you are sharing with them, that it'll have a positive impact on their practice and their students? And can you craft that? If you can't craft a believe in reason, then teachers shouldn't do it. Teachers shouldn't do it. It has to be a believe in reason that if I invest the time and effort, it'll make a difference. And so I work with leaders to craft a believe in reason. And so we talk about it. Believe in reason has to be clear. It has to relate to a specific need. It has to be credible. There has to be some evidence that it relates to our context and will give us the desired results to address the need that we mentioned before. And it has to be contagious. It has to communicate the benefits. What are the benefits to teaching and learning? How will my daily day be better? Right? All the stuff I got to do on a regular basis, how will that be better? Right? And then how do we spread that why over and over again? Craft the believe in reason. Instead of trying to sell folks on something, we have to think about the value of it. And a lot of times in doing that, people will be like, well, maybe everybody doesn't need this. And you can craft choices, right? Well, you think about, who, especially, with my universal design for learning hat on, in order to offer PD choices, I often think about, well, who's most likely to need more support? Who's most likely to need more challenge? What options can I build in, put those available for everyone? And now teachers have some agency to choose where they feel like they need to go. Right. And so I think that's my personal philosophy in terms of professional development. It has to be worth something for people to want to invest the time.
Yeah, it just seems kind of basic, but I think it's still lost on some people sometimes. And it's a good reminder that I think you'll get more results and happier teachers if you are paying attention to some of these things.
Oh, and one other thing I want to mention.
Yeah.
The other thing is people also underestimate the role of environment. And so whenever we're doing a professional development initiative, I also say, let's look at the environment in which we're operating. So that's not only the physical environment, but your schedule, how people are collaborating together, the resources that are immediately accessible. Because if we don't change the environment, human behavior naturally has us revert back to status quo every time. If we don't look at our protocols and practices, we will go back to the way things always have been every time. That's just because we've developed a system to do that. And so it's not just about learning about where does this learning apply in daily moments. And as I think about how to apply that learning in a daily moment, what resources would I want to make readily available so I can apply that practice in that moment? So it's not just about learning in that moment, but learning professional development, but what is this? Is the space designed to set up for that? That's another key thing that I think is really important that people often forget.
What's been your most favorite or your most powerful professional learning experience that you've led with people or maybe it's a surprising, either powerful, surprising, or your favorite kind of professional learning experience that you've designed and led?
Oh, so I love that question because it made me think about something that I hadn't shared yet.
Okay.
So the thing that's been most powerful for me was during our curriculum representation series that we were doing. Actually, I'll put it this way. Prior to, because it's kind of a little backstory to this. Prior to COVID, my team and I would do equity walks in schools. And I was like, man, these posters, just the classroom decor is not very diverse, like in terms of the children and stuff. And I was like, and it feels like teachers know that it's not diverse. So there's a lot of posters of animals. And I don't understand this overuse of the hang in there kitten. Like, I'm not sure have you seen the hang in there kitten?
Yes.
Why? Who's motivated by this? I don't know. Yeah. Maybe somebody, but I feel like children should be able to see themselves.
Yes.
And so when we started doing the curriculum representation and I started thinking about the environment, and students and teachers were saying like, well, how do I set up my classroom environment to really support this work? And they were looking for more diverse representation. They couldn't find it. And so, the world is starting to get a little bit better, but we actually founded this and then we made it. And so we work these into our professional development sessions. So when we do a curriculum representation series, a school or a school district will actually purchase these in bulk, but we decided to make them available to everyone. And it's our diverse classroom decor. So diversedecor.store, and all of the, actually, I don't know, can I share my screen?
Yes, you can. You should be able to.
Right.
I saw you post about this a while ago, and I was thinking about when I taught in the 90s and 2000s. There was basically one classroom set of posters for like Black History Month that you could buy that were like 20 years old.
And they're only of like famous people. You could only get posters of like Martin Luther King. But not like regular.
And it made me think of that immediately. And so this is really this is needed for sure.
Yeah, and so these are from schools that we work with. So it's original photography. My end goal is to work with school districts to have pictures of their own kids in them.
That's a brilliant idea.
That's my end goal. And so we're working on like how have schools be able to license from us. But every poster has a quote on it from somebody who's had to overcome something. So this one has a quote from Helen Keller. My favorite one is the Wilma Rudolph quote here. The secret is learning how to lose. That's my favorite thing to see. Winning is great, sure, but if you're really going to do something in life, the secret is learning how to lose, right? And then, so then you can also talk about the Wilma Rudolph story, but what is pictured is a student. And we really wanted to say, how do you have an environment that not only shows belonging, but promotes a sense of learner agency, learner self-efficacy, not that things are always great or perfect, right? But that you have the power to choose and decide and determine your direction. So
Wow.
that was fun. And then when we started incorporating it into the PD, the quotes that teachers were taking away as really impactful for them. And someone would say like, that reminds me of my kid with a beanie. And it didn't matter what race they were, like that reminds me of my kid, right? And so it was just really powerful. And it helped people see that diversity is something positive. Diversity is an asset. It is joyful. It is not meant to create strife. It's meant for us all to learn and grow more. Especially when you think about it like from a biological standpoint, diversity is good. Without it, we'd be extinct. So, that's, something we always have to remember. It should be celebrated. Yeah. Yes.
I've been doing all the talking here. Does anybody else want to jump in the last few minutes? We usually go over a little bit. Nicole, do you have a hard stop?
No, okay. I don't.
I'd love for other people to jump in and ask a question or share an experience or just offer a comment, anything. Cindy, you were talking about design thinking earlier. You want to share your experiences with us? Because I think design thinking would go hand in hand with equity.
Yeah, I do a journey mapping exercise with folks.
Everybody's so quiet today. Come on. We're so glad to have you here, people. All right, somebody saying something?
Yeah, that's me, Cindy.
Lucy, this is Ann. I've got a quick question.
Put my face
Have
on
you
the
been able to
screen.
have this conversation with any school leaders? Because that's one of the real challenges.
So I heard two things. So I'll start with Ann, and then because Cindy, I didn't hear your question. So Ann, yes, I have lots of conversations with school leaders because they're the ones that have to lead the ship. And honestly, the article, The Illusion of Equity PD, I was writing it with leaders in mind. So
school boards as well.
So I tend to work with the folks who have to talk to the school board, and I help them prepare what they want to say. And so I can see it when they get interviewed by the newspaper. And I was like, oh, those sound like those words. I know those words. And so I think it's better, rather than me coming into their school board meetings, is to equip them to be able to say the things. That way it doesn't look like I'm like brainwashing people.
True. I would say that there's probably a place at the national level in larger education training opportunities for board members at the state or the national level to hear this kind of language, this kind of thinking, this kind of messaging, because there are some pressures in communities that are making this a very uncomfortable time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm definitely open to any of those conversations. I used to do a lot of work with CCSSO. I was a consultant with them before I had to withdraw when I was going through cancer treatment. But I'm open to presentations. If you know of somebody who wants the work, let me know. I'll put my email in the chat. And I think there are a lot of conversations that need to be had, in particular at a state level.
I'm in Virginia. Yes.
Yes, I grew up in Virginia.
Nicole, I don't know if you saw the chat, but Ann used to work for the new National School Board Association. And I agree, Ann, this is a great conversation, not to go into one district school board, but to have it on a bigger scale.
Yeah, I think yes, state and even nationally. I definitely think it's something that school boards need to understand, because they're getting persuaded by less informed groups.
Absolutely. They're feeling a lot of public pressure from people who couch this conversation in very different terms. And so I think you bring a different and a fresh perspective to the conversation.
Yeah, you need to get to Texas.
I do a lot of work in Texas, actually. I'm busiest in California and Texas.
I'm not in Texas, but I just know there's been a lot of commotion in Texas that they need your help.
Well, thank you, Nancy. And then Cindy, you had something you were going to say?
Yeah. So, well, number one, I just want to say I really love your presentation. I think it's really, I love the positivity, that whole idea. And actually, my comment has to do with dealing with a lot of the politics and the negativity that come about with trying to bring about change. And I do come from a kind of a varied background, from marketing and nonprofit work to education in K through 12, taught English probably 15 years, and then moved over into instructional design. And a lot of that movement was coming from frustration with really the way that teachers were being trained. I think there was a real need for it. I think there was an explosion of change, the 2010 to, 20s. But I think that a lot of frustration is for teachers. I think there is a spectrum of teachers, those who both do want to change, and I think we kind of know this, those who want to be told what to do, and those who are leaders and who want to make a change, and then those who are just gonna I don't know, they're gonna wait, right? And then those who just put their heels on the ground, say, I'm not changing, I'm too old, I'm not gonna do this, right? And I think trying to find that right space to create enough, I call it, backing for those teachers who are ready to really make change. And someone I mentioned design thinking, and design thinking is something that design thinking is an area that I really believe is important for teaching. And in many other areas, because I just came off of another contract working with a college, and seeing that, the preparation for the career arena and just for jobs is another space where it's kind of the same thing that's been happening in high schools, right? Where, oh yeah, do all these things, but people may not really be ready, or they're kind of entrenched in their ways of thinking. So it's hard, but it's hidden. It's not necessarily like, no, we're not going to do it. They bring you in. Yeah, we want change, but you get there and it's like, no, they really don't want that, and so you just have to kind of part ways. And I think that it's an interesting dilemma, perhaps, or challenge, really, it is challenge, to think about how to kind of find the right people, I guess, to say, hey, let's group together and try to find ways to really make positive change. Because I met some great people, but then it was like, oh darn, this isn't going to work here. And so I just am curious about your experience in those areas, and how to better, kind of gather those people who are ready to make those changes.
Well, here's my thought on resistance, right? And so whenever I encounter, because like you said, I call them, there are the resistors, and then there's the who are more than ready, right? Resistors and then more than ready. And so what I often say is, okay, well, when I think about the resistors, and if I have conversations with them, what I try to do is listen for the root of their fear. What is it that they're really concerned with, really afraid of? Because that is going to impact which direction I go, right? Because it could be that they, at the root, there is a loss of power, or a loss of expertise, or, okay, great. Or a loss of something else. But that'll determine which way you go. Every time I have taken that time to really listen to the root of concern, it's actually made my initiatives better and better and better. That's how I got here, was from really listening to those who were scared. Not changing the message, but thinking about how can we create a space where they can receive it. Because here's the thing, you can't change anyone, but we can create the space for change to be more likely. So that was one thing. Then I go to my folks who are more than ready, and I say, okay, we need to do this in a way that we're modeling and creating evidence that this is beneficial, and giving others the courage to try. So I'll start with those early adopters, right? And we'll do it in a way where we're really explicit about what we're doing. We're modeling, we're showing our thought process. We're even, we have selective vulnerability where we're sharing, okay, that didn't work so well, but this is what I did about it, right? So you don't seem like you're perfect, and that gives folks the courage to try. And then you'll start to expand your circle, because you're not going to change everybody at once, but those are the kinds of things that give folks the courage to try. And then the other thing that I've been doing a lot of, and this probably goes to a lot of the board work, is I've been doing a lot of work on aspirational communication that came out of the Hathaway group. I don't know if you're familiar with the Hathaway group and aspirational communication, but they were the same folks that really galvanized the work around getting gay marriage finally legalized nationwide. And they talk about when we are communicating something, don't feed their fear, but feed their aspirations. And so I look into that in terms of communication guidance. Just a few things.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And I have to agree also just with the whole, if educators don't see people like themselves also though, and then it's also that fear. And I think the cultural sensitivity area is another one. I mean, just being Asian American myself, I think that there are a lot of things culturally that I think don't get addressed, and kind of the model minority issue, and just a lot of the concerns that come about, I think don't often get addressed. I mean, honestly, Asian Americans, I think often get seen as like, oh, they're wonderful, they're compliant, they're just like, oh, they're trying so hard, we don't have to worry about them, kind of thing. And I think that unfortunately, that can also lead to a lot of marginalization and kind of like, oh, well, hey, you just do your terrific thing, and we're about everybody else, or we're a threat to this other minority group, and so we're not going to talk to you, because I don't know, you can take care of yourselves or whatnot. And I think that kind of goes for the educators as well too. So I think that that's something that I've kind of struggled with in a lot of the environments that I've been in. And you just get kind of like, oh, you're the good person, just be quiet, or, hey, you know what, we're going to kind of push you out of the picture. And because we know that, you're not going to be really hurt anyways, it's not a problem, or we can do that and no one's going to say anything because, you're just that quiet group that, goes along with everything. And I think that that's problematic, in a lot of educational areas. And that's an area that I think, okay, it's not like they have to be like in your face all the time, but I think, gee, there's not really a lot of sensitivity for, and a number of other minority groups, I think that can happen too. So that's something that I think is interesting. And that's why design thinking to me is also that area where it's important to design, your system so that those voices can be heard. So that's what I really like a lot we've talked about today and all the different resources. I'm trying to figure out how to work that in.
Yes, and I love what you're saying, Cindy, because like just in that little bit, you got to share a little bit of your story. Like this is how I've experienced some of the educational system, right? How people have judged me based on what they see, and that, oh, you don't need that, or you're going to behave like this. And I feel like, we do have to design our systems in a way where people can share their stories. Right, where people can say, this has been my experience. And yes, my experience is not your experience, because your experience is only yours. You're right. That's something sometimes people forget that. They're like, well, that hasn't been my experience. I'm like, of course not. You're not me.
And I think giving space for value of it, where it's like, well, maybe because merit-based, there's always a whole merit-based and equity, right? That whole thing. And I think that in a lot of Asian culture, there's a lot of this, merit-based, you're going to work your way, you're going to work really hard. But really, when you look at the statistics and you're looking, let's say, California, and you look at all the colleges, right? Oh my gosh, and all those Asians in there, I got to keep them out. So, I think there is concern, on my part of how to navigate that space so that the voices can be heard, and that in some ways people don't end up shooting themselves in the foot, right? And that they don't speak out because it's culturally you're not really kind of supposed to, right? And I think that if you do speak out, and then they don't listen to you, right? So I think there's all these interesting, intersections of, equity and being able to speak, and then sort of like trying to be true to your ethnic heritage and all whatnot, so that you'll still be valued and honored, because the honor there is so important, right? Like, hey, I'm not going to listen to you because I don't think you're really, honoring your culture. And I think being to talk to other educators, then you're suddenly in this other space where you're like, oh, you're not speaking up enough or well, we're not going to listen to you and kind of thing. And so I think it's a continuing conversation, as it goes on, and trying to find that place that you can kind of have the elephant that's looked at, elephant in the room, and you're, looking at the more than just the tail, or more than just, the paw, or, more than just the foot. And that's something that I'm really interested with design thinking, trying to figure out how to make that happen in a way that brings people together. Because I hear it all the time, collaborative, but it doesn't really happen.
Oh,
and so
you know what? And if you feel up to it, and jumpstartpd.com, if you join, there's a recording. So every month we do a Wednesday webinar. So like once a month, there's a Wednesday that we do a free webinar. And not this last time it was on PD Outside the Box, 5 models of innovative PD. The one before that was around tips for listening to diverse perspectives. Like, here are 5 tips for facilitating conversations across diverse perspectives. Like, these are things that I've seen gone very badly from people who have very good intentions. So, and all of those webinars are like quick 30 minutes. We get in and get out. And Lucy came to one and it's packed, but then I stay on for a little bit in case there's questions.
I love your approach, Nicole, because you're not assigning blame for the problems that are there. You're not putting people in a defensive mode in any way. There's no anger. It's like everybody's like excited. And I think as we see more and more changes in our classrooms with, refugees in our classrooms and all kinds of perspectives. I know I worked with the teachers group in Texas once, and the teacher says, well, I see all my kids as the same. I don't see them as different. And she thought that was a good thing. And it was meant well. She meant
yeah,
well.
It's always meant well.
But it wasn't how they needed to be seen. They need to be seen and honored for their cultures too, and their differences, and celebrated and understood. So yeah, it's just a big conversation and a big road ahead.
Yeah, I think that it's important. And on one hand, I have a very positive approach, but also I don't mix words. Right. Like I will have a real conversation. We will talk about the real things, but I come from a place of like contribution. I try to always speak in love. I don't think blame really gets us anywhere. And even with things like when people do, I've seen workshops published and the title will be like, check your privilege. Like, that's the title of the workshop. And I'm like, no one's going to that workshop who really needs to examine their privilege. The people who go to that workshop are already examining their privilege. Right? Because it's called check your privilege. Whereas when we talk about privilege in our workshops, I talk about, privilege is contextual. It depends on context.
Everything depends on culture and context.
Right. Everything. It depends on context. And I share with them this article about, I read this article right after I got off a plane, and it's called, it used to be called The Disempowering Experience of Flying. How does it? I think it's a disempowering experience of flying as a disabled person. I think that's the name of it. It's from the December Time issue. And I'm reading this article about this woman who she tries to avoid flying because she's in a wheelchair, and just the horrible experience that she has to go through in order to get on a plane, how she has to restrict her liquids and how she's treated as if that's all she can do, right? They literally take all of her agency away from her. And she talks about, can we think about for a moment what it's like for those who are experiencing the brunt of our systems and the design and experience that is actually better for everyone. And I read this article and I got chills, because here it is. I do all this work in universal design for learning. I never for once thought about how much privilege I have as flying as an able-bodied person. And I take all the privilege I get. I'm A-lister, I pre-board, I do all the stuff, right? I never thought about how much privilege I have. And my first instinct was to feel guilty. Right? I think that's a natural instinct, because we have a self-positivity bias. We want to think that we're good people, and we are good people, but that doesn't mean we don't make mistakes, right? And so I had to move from guilt to empathy to action. And that's why I say it's natural to feel guilty, because we want to know that we're doing good. But staying in guilt only serves my belief to think of myself as perfect. Can we move from guilt to empathy for others to action? And so that's That's really what I try to do in our sessions. And that's also how I try to coach people in having language that will call folks in rather than calling them out. Cancel culture is not really going to work.
Thank you. That was wonderful. I have to leave. I'm so sorry. You've been absolutely amazing. Everybody else stay. I'm just going to have to leave, but thank you so much. And thank you, Lucy, for inviting me to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here, Julian. It's great to have you all. I think everybody's probably looking to move on too, so I don't want to keep everybody. I would talk to you all day, Nicole, if I could. Is there anybody else before we wrap up and I do my little final spiel? Did anybody else want to have a comment or want to offer something to the conversation? Everybody's so quiet. Well, let me pull up my slides, and if anybody, and while I'm doing that, people can think if they want to say something more. So you're going to be at ISTE, right, Nicole? So some people
I haven't decided yet.
Yeah.
I know. Well, if somebody gives me a good reason to go, I keep asking if anybody's going, and everyone says, I don't know. So
I wonder if they're worried about attendance. I don't know. Like a month or so ago, they had some sort of deal. And I thought maybe perhaps it was because they, attendance was low. We'll see. I don't know. I'm kind of itching to go now, but I have to, I don't know. I think maybe in the next couple of weeks, I'll make a decision. A, I'd love to go to New Orleans. B, I would love to see people in person again.
Yeah.
And, and kind of think about, learning again as in a group. So
well, if you go, let me know. I'm trying to.
Okay.
I have no barriers to going other than I need to be able to justify why.
Yeah. I do. I need to do it for my family's sake too. So before we wrap up, I just want to make sure that you all have the links for Nicole. Follow her on Twitter. Go to lessoncast.com, Jumpstart PD. Definitely join Jumpstart PD. Nicole, just to kind of clarify things, with Jumpstart PD, you join and there are like a couple different tracks that you join, correct? Or PLCs so within that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can just join as a general member, or you can say, I want to get more information about this or that. And then later you can always change what you want to follow. And so it's a general free community. There are some groups that I work with that have like, it's almost, think about it like a college campus, and you can have different majors. And then you can also take different courses. So there's some like private courses, there's some courses that are open to the general public, but there are lots of things that we do just for our general community, such as the weekly or the monthly webinars, and we'll have like weekly like wellness tips. Because we really think that, so rarely do professional developers or professional learning designers have anyone pour into them.
Yeah. And coaching seems to be getting more and more attention. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's key. I'm just thinking of Apple's, new coaching program and things like that. So this would be really beneficial to people who've gone through those programs, I bet, to be part of that. So what's the difference between Jumpstart PD and LessonCast?
Yeah,
because LessonCast I thought was kind of a platform.
Yeah, it used to be more of a platform. You know how things change over time. Yeah, LessonCast was a technology platform back when you first met me. So now it is the name of the company. It was always the name of the company. But on LessonCast, that's where you can go if you want to reach out, if you want to book us for any workshops. This is definitely the commercial side. So if you want to book us for workshops related to UDL or the curriculum representation series, or even I do workshops on PD for PD leaders. So I'll do, sometimes I'll work with a school district or a division and do the Supercharge series for them, and craft it for them. And we'll go through the different Supercharge exercises and templates.
Okay. Yeah. Got it. So we're kind of set up the same way with Actionable Innovations Global. Like there's a public community of about 29,000 people from our previous conferences where they can post stuff to the community. There's videos, there's resources if you're logged and things like that. And then we're trying to start a consulting group
Exactly.
aside from that. So it's some very similar setup. Okay, that's really helpful. So make sure that you check out Nicole's work and follow her. And then the last thing I want you to see if people would do this little experiment for me. Whoops, I went the wrong way. We love Don Buckley, who's not here today. He turned me on to these D-School Masters of Creativity sessions that are every week. And they have a QR code that allows you to scan it, and then it will open up as a tweet, and then it will be like a thank you. And so what I did, I made this, and what it'll do is it'll make a populated tweet, and then you can tweet out your thanks to Nicole to it. So there's only a few of us left, but maybe if a couple people tweeted it out. I thought it was kind of a fun thing. This Masters of Creativity series they bring in different authors. They have great music playing when you come in. The people are like really upbeat and fun, and they get like 200 people every time they do a webinar. And Don has been going to them for years, or I guess it started during the pandemic, so it's not been that long. But and they're entrepreneurs, they're design thinking people, it's not necessarily education related, but there's always something that you can learn from them to apply to whatever your practice is. And so anyway, we've been emulating some of their tactics. So if anybody wants to tweet out I'm going to tweet it out right now.
I love this.
To thank. Yeah, I think it was QR code generator. I think you can do it right on their front page. And I thought it was kind of a nice tactic, or a nice little thing to do. So hopefully you'll get a couple shout outs that way.
I love it. I already got one.
And Nicole, if you want to come back and just be part of our group too, whenever you have a chance.
Sure. And
we'd
I
love
know
to have you come
Bobby.
be the audience. Yeah. So Bobby, if for people who may not know Bobby, she used to run Curriki, and she's been part of Penn's. You probably from Lesson Cast. You were probably part of the Penn Graduate School of Education incubator stuff. So she's run that for a long time. And so has a new book out about women in empowerment, and she's going to be with us on May 9th, which is a different time. So we're starting to do these sessions on Monday morning. So if people want to jump in right away, and on Wednesday evenings, and then on Friday afternoons. And I don't expect people to come 3 times a week, but if your schedule allows and your time zone allows, hopefully those times will sync for somebody. So she's going to be our first Monday speaker. We're kind of moving that. We're going to keep the Friday ones, but we're expanding, and she's going to be our first experiment with that. So that's May 9th. And then we have a woman who is a friend of Don's named Linda Vasu, who's a director of curriculum at a school in Greenwich. And she integrates computational thinking into her teaching. She's an English teacher. She's amazing. And then we have a guy from Hapara, Rich Dixon, who's into project-based learning and open education resources. And then we have Lee Castle in June from Canada, who does the Humane Digital Library and a bunch of other things, including she also runs in Canada a First Nations Speakers Bureau, which is kind of cool. So the whole idea here is to bring interesting people that, Don and I and others have come across, and bring them to meet everybody else and see what kind of synergy happens from that. And I just want to say thank you so much, Nicole, for being here and for spending a little bit of extra time with us. And I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you. The same to everybody. I really appreciate being here, and I hope to see you all either again virtually, or hopefully it's at one point in time in person, and whether that's at ISTE or somewhere else. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. All right. So here, let me stop the recording.